Hi YouTube, today I'm going to be doing a video demonstration on how to replace the rear bearing and hub assembly on your 7th generation Honda Civic sedan or coupe. This procedure applies to all Honda Civics 2001 through 2005 that employ the use of rear drum brakes. So I'm not sure how well you guys can hear this, but I'm basically driving right now on a side road, and you can sort of hear that bearing making sort of howling noise. I'm going about 50 kilometers an hour right now, and you can hear it kind of go woo, like it's almost like a wooing noise that just sort of persists. You hear that? That's going about 60 kilometers an hour. I can hear that wooing. And so the sound seems to diminish as you get sort of higher up towards highway speed, such that the road noise itself sort of kills off of that howling and growling of some sort. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to replace the bearing. In order for us to get to the rear wheel bearing, we need to remove the rear tire and then take off the rear drums. Now, prior to me removing the drum, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take a screwdriver here and then just carefully remove the securing nut dust cap off of the drum, using a screwdriver and a hammer to break this loose. And when you remove the cap, it exposes this 32mm nut, which we can then go ahead and use our impact gun to break loose. Now, some argue that the little notch that's tapped in here should be pried with a screwdriver, which certainly isn't harmful, but because my impact gun is strong enough, it'll just break loose quite easily. Like so. Now we can go ahead and release the parking brake to actually remove the drum off. So as you remove the drum, set that aside, you can then go ahead and just give our hub a tug gently, and it should just come straight off. As you can see here, look at the amount of play in this bearing. That's really bad, and this is what's causing that howling when I'm driving the vehicle. Like, there's so much play here that you can, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but for a car that's got almost 400,000 K, that's very impressive. Now, since we're in here and we have all this brake dust, we may as well go ahead and give it a good spraying with some brake cleaner, just to clean things up a little. We can just go ahead and give our shaft here a nice cleaning, make sure it's free of any dust and grit. This is my brand new rear bearing from Honda. It's part number 42200S5A-008. And the rear hub assembly is the same for the driver's side and passenger side wheel. So this is what the new rear hub and bearing assembly looks like from Honda. And we can see here that Honda's factory uses the NTN bearings, which is no real surprise. But I want you guys to pay attention here. The fact that if you look at the bearing, there's no movement whatsoever. It's actually quite tight, and in fact, even when I grip the inside of the bearing race and try to spin it, that it feels quite firm. And again, if you look at the front side here, there's also no play whatsoever. Now, it is worth mentioning that when you're doing the reinstallation of old bearings or new bearings, that you want to take care not to drop this. Reason is, you see these little notches here on the back ring. This is actually for the ABS sensing system, where the sensor is actually located there. If you nick this, then the magnetic pickups don't work properly, causing problems. And also, of course, you don't want to drop and damage the studs. And to do the reinstallation is super simple. We just make sure that there's nothing inside the race, nothing's on the shaft, and then slide this assembly. Like so. So once we've reinstalled the bearing assembly onto the shaft, we can now go ahead and reinstall our securing nut. Now, it's worth mentioning here that on this particular Civic, on my Civic, there's no washer underneath the securing nut. And it's because of the style of the nut that came from the factory. It's actually a nut with the securing sort of, or I guess the seating washer sort of all built into one. On other vehicles, I've seen a nut and a separate washer. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now, to reinstall this nut, we're just going to go ahead and use our impact gun and tighten that back down. And then we're going to go ahead and use our torque wrench and tighten it to 135 foot-pounds. And as you can see here, the notch on the nut lines up perfectly with the notch on the shaft. And it is worth also mentioning that we don't need to worry about this spinning, because remember, this center shaft actually is a fixed position, whereas the hub itself will rotate. And then go ahead and reseat this notch to prevent it from backing up. Now normally, guys, you probably want to use like a cold chisel. Unfortunately, I broke mine, so I'm just going to use my screwdriver, even though I know I'm going to wreck them. So once everything's tightened down and we've re-secured the nut, we can then go ahead and reinstall our little dust cap here. Now, before doing so, to facilitate easier bearing replacement in the future, which on this car I doubt I will need to before it dies, is put a thin coat of copper anti-seize or nickel base anti-seize onto the perimeter of the cap, and then just insert it, and using a hammer, carefully, paying attention you don't hit any of these threads, reattach the cap. And you shouldn't have to hit hard if you didn't mangle the edges of this cap. Then conversely, before we reinstall the drums, we're going to go ahead and just put a thin coat of anti-seize again where the drum meets the hub, again to prevent seizing and to facilitate the easy removal of the drum in the future. Go ahead and reinstall the drum. And then reinstall your tire. Once your tire's been reinstalled, with the parking brake off and the wheels chalked, tighten your lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. And then don't forget to re-torque your lug nuts after driving for about 10 miles. So as you can tell from my video demonstration, that replacing the rear bearing and hub assembly on this Honda Civic is neither difficult nor time consuming, and is accomplished with just a few basic hand tools. My vehicle now no longer has that annoying bearing howl when I'm driving down the road between 50 and 80 kilometers per hour. I hope you found this video useful and informative. Rate, comment, and subscribe.